Hey everyone, this is Mr. Standing.
And this is Mr. Fort.
Despite whatever our past selves may say about this episode, we actually do have a sponsor for it.
What? If you like your shrunken women a little more animated than the title character of our featured film, check out the size writing of Tatus.
There's Becky in the fetish-fueled lesbian rom-com Purse Pet. She traded her freedom and most of her height to be owned by the woman she thought she loved. The course of true lust never went pear-shaped so fast.
Or there's Anna in One Big Love. She's got to navigate falling in love with both her roommate and her best friend while seeing eye to eye with an action figure and having a 30-foot tall mom.
Two women looking for love in all the large places. Available on Amazon, eJunkies, Kobo, Google Play, and other fine e-tailers.
And if you prefer tiny men, he's got you covered too. That's Tatus. Taedis. Search for him by name.
And also, thank him when you get the chance for being our first sponsor here on the Modern Metamorphosis podcast.
Yeah,
thank you, Tatus.
Give him like a high five or something, but no, we gotta stay safe. Keep your distance. Thumbs up.
Yeah, do that like 6 foot high five safety away from him. Thank him for that. And if you'd like to,
it'd be like Demolition Man.
Ooh, yes. If you'd like to be like Demolition Man and advertise on Modern Metamorphosis podcast, make sure you email us at modmetapodcast@gmail.com. And thanks again, Tatus.
Thank you. I completely forgot that they did the no touching thing in Demolition Man, and I forgot how relevant it was until just now.
Hello, and welcome to Modern Metamorphoses, the podcast that takes a look at comics, prose, movies, TV shows, and other media involving the physical or mental alteration of its characters or metahuman themes. Striving to be insightful, respectful, and inclusive, this series will discuss at times adult material, but will itself be all access. Join us now as we look at how metamorphoses in media have evolved into the modern era. The I of that we is the comics and transformation prose writer, Dan Standing.
And I am the fantasy fetish researcher and scholar, Alex Fort. You did it! I'm so proud of you.
All we need is like a 2-month break between episodes, and all of a sudden I'm competent at this.
It's all that open air you've been getting.
Yes. A lot of cold, fresh Cleveland air. But good for the brain reading thinking. I don't know.
Good for the soul, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I like it plenty. Anyway, yes, welcome listeners. For those of you who are unaware, which is all of you, we've actually been on a little recording break.
Yeah.
Not represented by our episode release schedule, which is...
What's funny is that it's actually in time with our release schedule. Like, we're a month between episodes and we're like a month between recording.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. But I've felt very rusty and I've missed our recordings. So I'm looking forward to getting back into this.
I am also extremely excited. It doesn't sound that way, but that's because the world is heavy.
Yeah, well, we're not going to look at the outside of the world. Welcome to this tiny little slice of fun in the transformation world. Modern Metamorphosis, the podcast. Dear listener, thank you for joining us. We are today looking at a French film, actually, a black and white 1957 French film. And if you've listened to one of our earlier episodes where, we mentioned what we were going to be watching, we watched, oh my God, all my windows have closed. I don't know why I need the IMDb page open to remember what the film is. I did watch the film. It is Girl in His Pocket.
I thought you were going to bring up the last movie. Yeah, I could have filled you in. My bad.
Oh, no worries. Again, we're getting our gears back in alignment here. We're getting ourselves here. So yes, this episode is about the 1957 French film Girl in His Pocket, which is based on a short story from, let me pull that up, I think 1918, yes, which is based on a short story called The Diminishing Draft by Valdemar Comfort, first published on February 9th of 1918. It was a short story in All Story Weekly. And I'm watching this film 100% believe that it is based on science created in 1918.
It absolutely feels like 1918 science, both in practice and effect.
Yeah, it's iffy science. I will say. Now, I'm not a scientist. I'm not part of any sort of scientific field, but I definitely look at this and I say to myself, I don't think that's how anyone should have done that science.
Yeah, it definitely screams like before OSHA and before, review boards. It was very the Wild West of collegiate science
Hmm.
and chemistry. It This movie is pretty much like a relationship drama combined with the story of how we discovered saccharin.
I don't actually know how we discovered saccharin. Was it a ridiculously accidental, but also sort of mean-spirited mad science sort of,
No, it's
thing?
more the sense of saccharin, and I believe I'm trying to remember the other artificial sweetener. Both of them were discovered in lab accidents
Hmm.
involving poor practice. So I believe saccharin was found. It was discovered because a guy was working with chemicals in his lab, and then like a doofus, he didn't wash his hands, and he went to go eat, and he's like, "My sandwich is really sweet, huh?" And he like licked his fingers, and he's like, "This is insane. What did I make?" And the answer is potentially poison, you idiot. Like
Yeah.
any impure reaction, you're probably eating formaldehyde. But he lived, and now we have like sweet and low, and yeah, the other guy was like a guy licked a beaker because um he was from another country. English wasn't his first language, and so he had a note from his like professor like, "Hey, can you like rinse this?" And he misread it and took it as lick this. And
Okay.
he did, and he's like, "Wow, this is delicious." And the professor probably was like, um buddy,
What did you do?
because any amount of time spent in organic chemistry, and you'll learn how many chemicals out there will kill you in minor amounts and with no remorse.
I 100% believe that. And
Organic chemistry is terrifying and fascinating, like all the other physical sciences. And so this movie screams that so hard of just flippant lab practice and just not thinking through. It's all about the coulda, not about the shoulda.
I feel like one of the reasons why I wanted to do Girl in His Pocket was because when I tried to look up this film, I found out about it by accident. I was on like Wikipedia's page of movies featuring shrunken people. Like that's an actual like
Oh,
Wikipedia subpage. And it was like Amour de Poche. And I was like, the hell is Amour de Poche? I've never heard of Amour de Poche. Well, when the original French film was Americanized, it was renamed to Girl in His Pocket. And it is described differently depending upon where you look. Now, if you go to IMDb, here is the only piece of information about the contents of this film listed on IMDb. It's cited to somebody simply known as Keith, and it says a professor experimenting in suspended animation accidentally shrinks his dog and later his female lab assistant when she drinks the liquid by accident and shrinks to 3 inches tall. The professor keeps her in his pocket until he can find an antidote. Sometimes she's naked too.
thank you,
Thanks.
Keith.
Thanks, Keith. Also, most of that is wrong.
Yeah.
That doesn't actually describe the plot of the film. I don't know why that was what you described it as.
I feel like
Um,
it's correct if he watched like it while over dinner and wasn't paying attention.
you definitely, yeah, could not have been listening to the audio at all because everything they're doing is pretty much intentional and stupid, and in some cases, just like again the sort of postmodern mad scientist who's really casual about his mad science. Like the closest thing I can say is if you imagine Gru from um, you know, uh,
Despicable Me.
Despicable Me, yeah, where he's just like this guy who, you know, lives in a suburban neighborhood and, just kind of has neighbors and then just casually goes to his lab and invents a freeze ray and then he uses that freeze ray on like people and animals that kind of annoy him. And that's the casual like application of the science of the discovery that our main characters do in this film. And this is from 1957, which had its own questionable ethics on scientific research and
Yeah.
discovery, but
Not one of the many low points of human ethics.
yeah. So let's delve into what actually happens in Girl in His Pocket. And
How do we get
the
that girl in that dang old pocket?
yeah. Oh, I wanted to mention the other thing. Also, the poster, as most posters from the 50s were anyway, the poster is also a lie because it shows our main heroine as a living being in a tiny bikini in like a cocktail glass, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's also not how it works in the film. But um, so let's pause a second
Mm-hmm.
and just remind everybody that one of the things that we use to help guide our thoughts about the film and how it relates best to transformation themes is the cause, process, and impact. The cause being what it is that is causing the transformation, but also why that MacGuffin is being used. And then process is, what do you see? How is it presented to us? And an impact is, is the transformation permanent? Is it impermanent? Does it leave a lasting lesson or impression on the character, or is there some sort of uh, you know, echo of the transformation left by the end of the film? Man, I am rusty.
Yeah. But hey, we're covering all the basics, which is fine. It's
Yes.
just finding the right words.
Eh, so we begin the film actually, I believe, with our main female character Edith, who's a student of our main male character Jerome, Professor Jerome. Is that correct?
Oh, his name's Jerome?
That's what IMDb lists it as. But the
Okay.
thing
Yeah,
is,
that sounds right, but like I had a moment where I was like, because it's dubbed, so they speak very, very
yes.
quickly.
Yes, and it is possible that IMDb is not specifying here whether or not these were the French names. I suppose it's possible that for the American dub, they could have also been changed slightly.
I
Um,
they so infrequently like call people by their names. Like they do it like very early on and then they never do it again. A
never
lot of
mentioned
it's like
again.
you.
hmm
So
And for me, it's also confusing because absolutely none of these names are the same names used in the diminishing draft, which I have read. Um, it's an interesting read, and I think we can revisit points from it either later on or anything of relevance that comes up in the movie. But
yeah.
because the story is a very okay, there's no way around it. This film, both in its motion picture version and in its original story, is just misogyny.
Oh yeah,
Like,
it's really really blatant.
yeah. And the movie, I think, actually made an attempt to like better humanize the female characters in so much that at least we spend time with them outside of the professor's viewpoint because the story is in the first person. But I actually feel like that's done more of a disservice to the female characters
By
than
by attempting to give them internal and external motivation, they reveal that they don't know how to give women motivation.
no. Because really our young student Edith's only motivation seems to be, I think Professor Jerome is cute and I want to spend more time with him.
Yeah, I'm going to learn how to do science because my lecturer is cute.
And first of all, that's always been a weird trope for me. Like even in like Indiana Jones, where like all the female students are like, "I love you," like on their eyes and all that. I've just kind of been like, there are other cute guys your age. Like, I get it, it's Harrison Ford, but
No, they want
like,
that mature dude
really?
who's stable and cool and, smart and responsible and also flies off to other countries to punch Nazis.
Yeah, granted that does sound fun, but
I mean, I'm
I,
down for it.
mm-hmm. But anyway, that just threw me off a little bit in the beginning because they try and in the film they try and make it be like, okay, so Edith is making the moves on Jerome, like she's the one who pardon me, she's the one who comes to him and kind of tricks her way into becoming his lab assistant, and certainly is overtly showing romantic intention towards him.
Yeah.
In the book, again, it's all first person from the professor's point of view. He has long already been in a relationship with this young woman, whose
Okay.
name is Jean in the story, and has arranged for her to become his assistant simply so that he can look upon her and her beauty as he does his work. So
Without proper eyewear.
mm-hmm. So they've reversed this in the movie where she is actually the one pursuing Jerome.
Yeah. And I don't understand how it even starts. Because, like, she walks into the lab and he's like, I'm busy doing science. You wouldn't understand. And she's like, but I also want to do science. And then, like, this, like, German dude comes in with, like, a bike and a breather and, like, his lab assistant's, like, helping him carry it, but also, like, not. And that dude, I don't even know what happened with that old man.
He shows up again later on just to be like another gag to throw as a speed bump in front of our main character here, Jerome. But
Oh.
yeah, it is one of many like short like side things in this film that don't really add anything to the plot. It's not an unusual thing though, I would think, for movies of the era where it's just like, oh, we've got this one character actor who the studio likes to throw into things, so let's write a scene in where he comes storming in flippers and everything, and it's clearly the old annoying scientist professor of the university.
Like, it seemed like a very shallow attempt to show personality, or like, let's get something in his way and show how he reacts to it. So what can we throw in there? I don't know, some dude with a bike that doesn't make sense? Yeah, that's an annoying thing. Everyone understands like how that doesn't belong.
Mm-hmm.
But then he I forget how he acquiesces to have this girl join him. It like was lost on me.
I think it has something to do with her just simply being able to use the computer, which is just a series of boxes standing on
Oh,
top of themselves in the set.
yeah,
Like,
it's like the punch card boxes, but even before that.
yeah, and even the one assist, like Jerome has this male assistant who clearly just seems bored and doesn't want to be there, and like he clearly doesn't even use the prop computer correctly. Like it spits out like a punch card. He examines it, he shows it to the professor, and then he like goes to put it back in, but like misses where it's supposed to go, and like has to like shove it in, and you can see the corner of it get caught, and he like closes the door. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh geez.
And then there's like a bunch of animals in this biology lab.
Yeah, so
And
this.
it's
Oh, go
kind
ahead.
of haphazard of just like there's guinea pigs and rabbits and lots of rabbits, and they're really manhandling those rabbits.
And
And
it
a
really
dog.
an a dog, and it really just seems that they're just doing animal science. Like that is it. Pardon me. I did not know what is going on with my voice.
You are just working out all that rust.
Yeah. Oh. Anyway, I don't think it's ever clearly stated what it is they're trying to do with these animals. Like they keep examining them and like putting them back, and like Jerome definitely seems like excited for something, but like it's never clear what it is that they're supposed to be like actually attempting to achieve.
Yeah, he seems very much like the movie scientist. Because I know later they describe like 3 projects they're working on, and we never see anything about it. So maybe that's what he's doing, but a lot of it just involves like there's timers on the cages that keep going off, and so they have to like weigh the animals or just look at them funny.
Yeah, it's very strange
It
that we
reminds
get
me of
no insight.
it reminds me of the extras like in Star Trek, like the original series, where they're just like in the hallway, like just doing anything to make it look like they're making a starship not explode in space.
Yeah. Well, or I even would have like this movie's trying to be funny, and so I would even have accepted it if it was some like Back to the Future like Part 3 Doc Brown thing where like you spend all this time with them in their science experiments, and then at the end you find like he's got the giant machine that just makes one ice cube, where it's like they're doing all of this science just to determine that yes, bunnies are soft. Like just something like that you could point at like the Ig Nobel like award at or something, where I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. This was supposed to be silly, but like there's never an attempt to justify what they're doing. But they're using some sort of weird chemical like that Jerome doesn't quite know all the properties of.
Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to say the most infuriating part of the science is not just poor practice, but just I have developed this chemical. What does it do? I'm not entirely sure. It makes ants disappear.
Yeah, like it's the extent of what he's done is that ants vanish when you touch this substance to them,
Which is cool on its own.
yeah, and that actually is not that's not too far from in the original story. It's amoebas, or really paramoeba, that they're applying what they describe as what is it? It sounded like a real thing actually, and I thought it was a real chemical until I looked it up, and I was like, oh nope, it's only in this story.
Yeah, it's like a mitochondrial condensate or something like that.
Yeah, in the story it's called oh crud, I know I have to can pronounce this. Baroterpenol. In the story it's called baroterpenol. It is not what it's called in the movie.
That's not a real chemical either.
No, it's not, but it fooled layman Dan here. But yeah, in the story it's just this like random chemical that like everybody knows about but nobody thinks much of because they think it just like, kills things. But in the story, yeah, like he's created this chemical and he does not know what it does.
But he also like talks down to Edith because she doesn't know, but he obviously knows not as little as she does.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know what this does, but I know more than you do.
I know more of nothing about it than you know the nothing about it.
Yeah, he's a real dick about it.
He is actually he's not a nice person. Not really.
And like they go to examine where the ants are going, right? They look at the thing, they both look down, and then like they both turn towards each other and they like kiss? Big question mark? And that sets off the romance.
It is kind of the like two people reaching for popcorn at the same time and touch each other's hands, but instead it's like two people like trying to go for the microscope and then somehow miss their noses and kiss like on the way up. Like it is a very forced interaction at that point. But yeah, so for whatever reason he decides now he's going to have two assistants because the other guy is still around. I think if eventually we find out that the other assistant has gone on vacation, so I guess he keeps Edith around to fulfill his role while he's gone.
Yeah.
But we do see that they've over a little bit of a montage spent quite a lot of time together, getting to know each other, and during this time we also meet his Jerome's fiance, who might be Monette.
I think it's Manette.
I think it's Manette. So
at least that's how they pronounced it in English.
I'm just gonna go with the dubbed pronunciation, even though subs not dubs. But so we meet his fiance Monette, whose father is in the soda business.
Yeah,
and like her father, she wants Jerome to quit being a research quote unquote scientist and join her father's company so that he can do experiments proving how tasty the soda is. And I do find it funny that earlier in the film, I was very much, I will say, amused by the film. I will say it achieved amusing me because there are things they set up, like earlier in the film, Edith and her like classmate talk about how they don't like this particular brand of soda. And then later on, you find out that it is Monette's father's brand of soda. That they are like, no, I don't want that. That's gross. And Monette, again, because this film's terrible and doesn't know how to write anybody, honestly, but especially not women. Monette is pretty single-minded.
Yeah, she's extremely disagreeable and single-minded. And it's a miracle that those two are together. And I don't understand why they stay together.
I am 100% sure that so it I, they mentioned at one point that Manette had a prior fiance, and that she and Jerome were already friends, like from childhood. And when Manette's fiance left her, she kind of drowned, cried on the shoulder of Jerome. And they literally say at one point, Manette doesn't want anything other in the world other than to be engaged and planning to be married. And so he just kind of gets engaged to her because that he thinks that'll make her happy. And it up until he meets Edith, apparently has no other reason to reconsider this. Like,
Yeah, even though there's a ton of behavior that we see about her talking, mad trash about his science, and it's like a dead end job. And he also talks trash about it. Like he Victor Frankenstein's and says like he wants to give up science because he can't figure it out like 3 times in the movie.
yeah, all of their motivations are either ridiculously shallow or completely the antithesis to what we see them doing.
Yeah.
Like, because he also doesn't want to quit that science to become the soda scientist. Like he's like, but what I'm working on will help the world, not help a soda. And I'm like, well, then why are you so eager to give up on it all the time?
Yeah,
Like,
he's like, I have put in my resignation letter. And
yeah.
all that.
So, basically, eventually, Edith and Jerome kind of act on their attraction to each other. They're kind of kissy. I don't think we see much else. Like, they're spending
We
like
don't.
long nights together.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of science in the lab late.
Science, quote unquote. Although
That they don't know what they're doing.
And eventually, I don't remember why Edith cries. Like, Jerome does something to make her cry.
I think it's when he's like, I'm going to give up on science. And she's like, you can't quit. And he's like, well, I'm gonna, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so she gets upset.
And the reason this is important is because she dries her eyes with her handkerchief, and then because she cleaned the glass pokey stick that they've been using to make the ants disappear. When they touch the slide again, the ant comes back.
Don't they appear on her face? I thought she cried and
You're right,
3 dots showed up on her face.
Yeah, she puts her hand. Sorry, I'm confusing it with the short story. She puts her hand on the table, and gets what the shrunken ants on her hand, and then puts it on her face. Yes, and her tears bring all these ants start popping back into existence all over her face.
And then the third most infuriating moment of the movie happens.
Yeah, because we all know that there's only one way to make that particular happenstance happen. To repeat it.
This Jerome's tears. It's tears. No, we've skipped a bit. We've absolutely skipped a bit. A whole bunch.
What did we skip?
We skipped the part where the dog drinks some and turns into a figure.
Oh, yeah.
And they learn, oh, it makes things small. Oh.
Yeah.
And then they, go through all this trouble of, bringing the fluid into, the zoo and just, getting elephants and rhinos and anything else, the prop department can make figures of.
I totally forgot that they did that after, before they figured out how to reverse it. Because, so after the dog drinks this stuff and shrinks down to about, 3 inches, this tiny little... Now, again, something else that's misrepresented about this movie is that once something shrinks, it becomes this little petrified statue.
It's like a plaster statue.
Yeah. Nobody's alive while they are shrunken. They are basically unconscious and solidified.
Yeah, suspended animation I think was the most correct term that thing had.
Yeah, I guess that's technically suspended animation, but once they realize what's happening after they see the dog, they go on this horrendous spree of shrinking every single animal they can get a hold of, and they go through all the rabbits and the chickens and everything, and then she goes to the zoo at one point with a bottle of it and tricks an elephant into drinking it.
Yeah, like when you look at the lab later, it's all black and white, but you can see that there is like literally every animal that you could possibly fit on a table.
Yeah, and they've clearly like cleared out the zoo. Like, I don't know how they got like, I think there's a rhinoceros on the table. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they even got into the cages or the
The
displays of some of the
enclosures.
animals or enclosures, but unless they are enclosures like the way the museum has displays that we see later on, where it's just like, you know, please don't touch things.
Yeah,
Like, it was like a
French natural
shrug.
science is really loosey goosey on the gate thing.
Yeah. So yeah, so it is this is one of those moments where it feels like the postmodern casual mad scientist where it's like, "Oh, we made a thing that shrinks things. Well, let's just go on a montage shrinking random crap." Um and at this point we should I want to mention, so we've got our cause right now of the substance and the fact that they're just experimenting willy-nilly on living creatures. There really is no process. Like,
Oh, the process is that really simple camera trick of now you see
mhm,
it, now you don't.
yeah, like I put live rabbit into smoking pot that you can't see inside of, and then I clearly move my hand a little bit and pick up the little like statuette and lift it out. Like,
Yep. There's like
that
a little
is,
like woo.
mm-hmm. Yeah, a nice little like Three Stooges sound effect goes off.
Yeah, like a very, Plan 9 from outer space sound effect, sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
sound effect. And then there's like a pop, and then ta-da, you have
Mm-hmm.
a porcelain figure that vaguely resembles what you put on it.
Yeah, as close as they were willing to pay somebody to whittle out of, I don't know, soap,
I
the
feel
creatures.
like they just like made like little plaster figures
Mm.
because they drop one at one point and that thing explodes.
Yeah, they kill by accident via shattering maybe a rabbit, and then later on, when Jerome goes to Monette and is like, "Hey, look at all this sciencing I'm doing," and he like shows her some chickens, she like breaks one by accident and is like, "Oh, look, they're so fragile. Like what, like
This
what
is
are you doing here?"
worthless.
Hmm. You can't even sell these as whatever. They're like they're more
Toys.
useless than porcelain. Yeah. So yeah.
And
So
he's like,
yeah.
that
So
was a live bird. What are you doing?
like that's the thing though, is that I don't even think Jerome and Edith, up until they realize they can't bring the dog back, like really value the lives of any of these things, because again, they don't know at that point until she touches their face that they even have any ability to bring these things back. Like
Yeah.
they jump to the conclusion that they'll be able to do it, but then again we get another montage of like them trying 20 different ways to doing it and them all failing.
They put it like in a pressure cooker, and they put it like in like a dry ice bath, and they put it like all these different like chambers and chemicals, and like none of it works.
Mm-hmm.
And then tears apparently
Yes.
is what it takes. A saline solution of what is it, 0.3%?
He rattles off something, but we know that that's. I mean, unless and I'm gonna turn to you as the person with the most medical information.
Uh huh.
Are human tears the same saline concentration as the ocean?
No,
Okay, so it
they're
makes no
they
difference.
have, they're not even remotely as the same salinity.
Yeah. So even the number that they give, where he's like, it's point oh whatever, like is total gibberish. Like it doesn't even matter
It
within the context of the story.
it matters until it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because like he's like, I need you to cry more. We need more tears. And she's like, is that all you're doing is using me? And he's like, damn women, they cry when you don't want them to, and they can't cry when you need them to. And then she's like, you're seriously objectifying me. And then she starts crying again. And he's like, yes, as
Yeah.
opposed to any chemist or any biologist with a first level course in chemistry can understand how to make saline.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of
Even
those scenes that's a weird holdover from the story, because in the story, again, the scientist just like plucked her out of his class, and because she was pretty, and has no care for her whatsoever, outside of her looks, and there are multiple times in the short story up until that point where it's talked about him being like talking about her so callously that he has brought her to tears. and that she cleans one of the things with her handkerchief, which is literally soaked in her tears from just how terrible this man is to her in the short story. So again, it's this weird holdover that doesn't make any sense how we've built these characters in the film. It's just like, oh, in the short story, he forces her to cry so he can get more tears. So I guess we just got to make him be a total jerk to her, so we can have this iconic moment from this 1918 story. Again, a 40-some-year-old story at the point this film was made.
Yeah, and they couldn't even do like that thing where they go to like a library and look up chemistry to even pretend like they know what they're doing.
Mm-mm. No.
Nope.
Nope. Jerome.
You're such a bad scientist, and I hate you.
Yeah. So they get the tears to work. They bring the dog back, and which I think was also in a comically like mismatched sized like bowl, if I remember. Like
it was like a basin.
Yeah, but even then, like the dog is clearly like Mary Poppinsing out of the like basin. Like it is still like the dog should not like the dog should have like regrown and like burst the sides of the basin like when it came to full size. Like
when you say rabbit in a hat, that was literally what that was, because the dude just like puts in the thing and he like drops in like a little bit and then he like rips this dog out of a void and this dog's like, whoa.
Yeah, it's comically bad. Like it's so absurd. So by that point, now that they've realized that they can bring things back, Jerome is like, oh, well, I guess he had earlier, yes, when they were forlorn, didn't think they could bring the animals back. He had quit. He had said he was going to turn in his resignation, quit the work at the university, and take the job at the soda science thing.
He's going to work at soda.
Mm-hmm. So now that he has proven that he has the ability to do this, and they come up with all sorts of really random ways for why this is like the future and going to save humanity. He goes back to the fiance and is like, I don't want to work for your father anymore. I'm changing my mind. And I think, is that the point at which he kind of half calls off he talks about that he will call off the engagement, but he hasn't actually done it yet.
Yeah, he's one of those cowards who says what will make both parties happy while getting exactly what he wants from both. So he's like, oh yeah, I'll absolutely call off the engagement, and then like he gets with his fiance and it's like, oh, that girl in the lab doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And it's like that's the other part that upsets me. Like there's like the science bit where the guy's like, yeah, imagine how many people we can fit in homes. Overpopulation's not gonna matter. It's like, these things don't do anything. They're not living in apartments. You're basically just making like a menagerie of tiny people.
Yeah, a frozen
not really
tiny
living.
People. Yeah, which is definitely, I get it. It's a kink in fiction, but if you're like proposing that as like, I'm down. I figured out the plot to Downsizing in the 1957. Like, no, like
within your own universe, that won't work that way.
Yeah, like that's not. You can't bring if you could shrink them and keep them that way, then yes, we have a terrible movie about that already in the now. But
in the future,
in the future, but you're not actually achieving what you're saying you are. Even Edith alone is the one who later on is like, you could shrink me down and mail me somewhere and then turn me back somewhere else. Like that's the most productive thing that they talk about.
Imagine how much you can save on airfare.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, honestly, the idea of like, okay, like someplace very remote could really use like a herd of cattle. Like, yeah. Maybe that's a function of this thing.
And all they gotta do is cry on it in order to get, cows. That's smart, but they don't say that.
No, like they don't quite make it to that point of what this would actually do to help humanity. Yes. And so Jerome and Edith continue, like their affair becomes a little bit more overt. They're spending longer and longer hours at the lab at the university. And one night, as they realize that they are there, I don't know, something like into 2 a.m. or something, and they like there's this little like divan. It's a tiny couch, and
a duvet.
Duvet, thank you. the they realize that Monette. Now I'm thinking about how these words look in my brain. Monette has arrived at the lab door and is banging on it and is demanding that Jerome admit that he has got Edith in there with him for quote unquote not science reasons.
It escalates so poorly because she's like, "Are you in there? Yeah, I'm in there. Are you alone? Yeah. Well, I heard someone else. Uh-huh. Well, you better open the door or I'll scream."
Yeah. And I'm not sure what screaming is really going to do, for
Get
her.
security in for a guy who works there?
But she's on the other side of a locked door. It's not like it's like, I'll scream and people will think you were doing something terrible to me. It's like, well, you're locked outside and away from me. So
I'm being murdered and you're not doing anything about it.
Yeah. Anyway, so Edith and Jerome kind of panic. They're running all over the place like Keystone Cops, which would be a timely and
Wow.
a timely reference that people would understand in 1957. And they realize that there's no place that they can hide Edith. Like the room just doesn't have anything that Monette won't find her in.
It's a big old 1950s set, and there are no corners.
Yeah, just come through the fourth wall. Like, it's not really there.
Yeah. Just walk off the set. You're safe.
Yeah, it'll be fine. And Edith's decision, the way to save them and get them out of this situation is she grabs the bottle and purposefully, again, Keith, it's not an accident. She knows what she's doing, Keith. She grabs the bottle and purposefully drinks the substance, and
she chugs it.
Yeah, she chugs it. And then a crossfade that vanishes from the screen, not only herself and the clothing we can see, but the bottle she's drinking out of.
Yep.
We get a little crossfade, some of that, rinky-dinky science fiction-y sound effects. And Jerome turns around and there's just a pile of clothing on the floor. Right?
And a small, like, plaster statue in it.
Yes. Edith has become, again, also not in the position that she was in when she drank this stuff. Every single creature, I guess, kind of goes into, like, Aristotle's world of the perfection, like, pose. Like, like, it's like, this is dog, here how dogs stand. This is elephant, here how elephants stand. This is woman stands straight up, arms down. No, like there's no motion to how her form has been captured. And Jerome pockets her into his jacket and then grabs up all her clothing and, like, shoves it into the closet, which Monette, after she's let in, does look in and, like, doesn't notice the ball of women's clothing.
Just looks in the locker shelf. Like, well, these are just women's clothes. No woman here.
Yeah, it's not like clothing without woman in it isn't not an indication of something going on.
Well, I mean, a woman does work in the lab. It's possible she could leave a spare pair of clothes, but that's me filling in the blanks for a movie I don't care about.
And also looking at it from a, like, outside point of, like, yes, absolutely, that's her spare clothes, not from, like, a woman who's expecting her husband to, or her fiance that is cheating on her, and
right.
would not definitely not make the jump to, oh, she has a change of clothing in the lab that is only one room and, doesn't have any place for privacy in it.
Yeah.
But this works.
Yeah.
Thanks to also a very talkative parrot, which is the one creature they haven't turned to stone.
Right. That's what I was thinking too. Is like the one thing they didn't freeze was the parrot we had never seen or heard before.
Nope.
This isn't Chekhov's parrot.
Nope. It's just like the parrot in Citizen Kane. Just like, I guess, although I know in Citizen Kane it was so that Orson Welles could wake up the audience if they were starting to doze off at that point in the film. I don't think that the parrot plays the same role in this film.
No, this parrot plays the part of alibi.
Mm-hmm.
Convenient alibi.
And Monette is suspicious, but leaves. And then
because her fiancé can't be trusted. They can't trust each other, but they're going to keep it together.
And she's going to hire a private detective to follow him around.
Yeah. A pinnacle of trust.
Mm-hmm. Which she also doesn't tell him, and he kind of overhears later, I think, right? Like he hears her talking to a friend about hiring the private detective to like watch him to see if he meets up with Edith again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Meanwhile, we have our other pretty creepy part of the film, where of course Jerome is now carrying around the naked stone miniaturized body of Edith.
Yeah, he's got a girl in his pocket, roll credits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he looks at that statue a lot.
He, like, stares at it fondly.
And doesn't seem to be at first in a particular rush to do anything about it. Like, I guess he also like these like I guess when they're in their okay, so I don't know how 1950s French like engagements work, but it seems like they're living in the same house.
Yeah, they're living in his collegiate estate because he has servants.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm just trying to figure out how the bedroom works because I'm pretty sure he spends the night that he brings her this little miniature stone form home to. He spends the night in his study.
Yeah, which is only like one like slight divider away from the bedroom.
Yeah, which again is at any moment Monette could just swing that door open and be like, "The hell are you looking at?" Propped up, across from you on the couch.
He has all these piles of books on his desk, and she's like, "I'm going to bed," and he's like, "Well, I'll be doing science," and then.
Yeah.
He like moves like one book out of the way, and there's like this like perfect little alcove of stacked tomes, and there's a little figurine in there, and he just like picks it up wistfully and stares at it, and he's like, "Yeah," and like puts it like in his breast pocket, and he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna sleep together."
Yeah. Also, guy, you know that this thing is fragile. Like, don't lay down in bed with it in your like nightgown pocket. Like,
Especially with your extremely suspicious fiance.
mm-hmm. Again, the characters in this film are awful. Not as completely sociopathic and awful as the short story, but just like the casual like and again, we don't have at this point any confirmation that like Edith is okay with him like just staring at her naked. Like I realized that when she took the stuff, she had some idea of what was going to happen to her, but there's a difference between like oh, I've got to quickly put you in my pocket, and I will put you aside, and I will figure out how to bring you back, and that will be the like. No, he's like fondling her and like staring at her, and I'm like, I don't know if you are at that point in your relationship with her, dude.
And they don't know what the experience is, right? Because all they've been doing is livestock, basically.
That's
And
also
so
true.
they don't know like if she's conscious while she's like that. They don't know if she can really experience anything while she's like that, or if it's truly a state of I don't remember what it was like in that. But we never
Sure.
know.
Not at that point. No, there's no way for Jerome to really know what it is he's doing to her in that particular state. Then the next morning, is there like an impetus the next morning? Like somebody calls and is like, "Do you know where she is?"
I don't think that's the next morning.
Okay, because he
I
definitely keeps her like that for a little while, and then I don't think he of his own accord is like, I guess I gotta turn her back. Like I thought I thought
the
somebody asked a question about the last time he'd seen her, and he was like, "Oh, maybe I can't like just keep her like this indefinitely."
I thought the impetus was that his wife was like, "I'm gonna go on a trip. I'm gonna be off and away," and he's like, "I gotta revitalize this girl so I can cheat on my fiance."
Maybe that is it. Yeah, maybe that is it. Because we then get this weird montage of him, like, doing the math of, like, how much salt water he basically needs. Like, how much of it, and where he's going to do it. Like, he tries to do it in his, like, bathroom at first.
Yeah. This is the second most infuriating part of the movie, which is the lengths a man will go to cheat on his fiance with a lab assistant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he desperately wants to get it on, but now he can't, he has to bring her back. So yeah, you're right. It starts with, he goes into his bathroom with a bathrobe and all that, and he's like, servant girl, could you get me some salt? And she's like, oh yes. And he goes, no, I need all the salt. And she brings it back, and he's like, "This isn't enough. I need more." And she's like, "I always buy enough." and
Yeah.
he's like, "Well, go get more. You know you need to get more." And so she brings back like a month's worth of salt, and he's like, "Perfect." And he like gets a scale and he measures it out, and he goes to turn on the bathtub, and the bathtub doesn't work. And he's like, "Servant girl, why isn't the water running?" She's like, "We're doing plumbing." And he's like, "This is the worst day of my life." And then he goes to like a public bath,
Mm-hmm.
and like, or he gets like a hotel. No, he orders water, and they're like, "Well, we have to wait for the payment to clear before we can deliver your water." He's like, "How long will that be?" He's like, 3 days. And he goes, "You're useless." And then he goes to like a hotel or like a bathhouse or something. He goes in there and he like measured out his salt, and he goes to turn the bath, and then like this dude walks in and he's like, "You can't put chemicals in the bath. You have to go somewhere else."
Yeah,
And
because
rather just
also
like, go on, please.
no, because I think it's common in Europe for the hotels, at least of the style that I'm seeing there, to have like communal bathrooms. So it's not like he's rented a hotel room that he knows will have a private bathroom. Like he's rented a hotel room and he's trying to do this science experiment in a room where he knows people will be coming in and out of.
So he can bone his lab assistant.
Yeah. So he gives up on that, and then he does one. There's like another like middle attempt between that and before he finally just gives up and like goes to the ocean. I don't remember what it is, but it's also equally weird and frustrating. And
I swear he's just like, is almost like looking at like the rain in the gutter, like, this is sufficient.
yeah. Now, again, to shift over to the weirdly dark version of this from the short story, in the short story, he is also trying to find. Oh, I remember. He goes to the other lab. This is when we see that weird other Professor Science again.
Oh, right.
He
The
wants to
scuba
use.
tank.
Yeah, he wants to use his scuba tank, and the guy's like, "I'm not letting you fill this thing with salt." And again, like a guy who seems to be doing things simply for simply to do them, not for any like recognizable scientific purpose.
Yeah, he's like in a small like brick bath, like a basin, and he like the dude's like in a full like wetsuit scuba outfit and can just like dives underneath the water for like half a foot just to be suspended in like 10 cubic feet of water.
Yeah, it's totally pointless, but again, just another non sequitur of the film.
Yeah, just one more obstacle to ruin this guy's day.
So in the short story, they've only really done by this point in the story they've only experimented on amoeba and goldfish. Like they didn't really move up to like mammals yet. And so he doesn't actually even know what the effect would be bringing her back to life. And the only reason he's doing it in the story is because her landlady has started calling around asking where she is.
Oh.
Yeah. So he kind of goes through all of these different options. He's like, well, I could do it in the lab, but, if she comes back, but she's dead, what am I going to do now with this full-sized body?
Right.
And it's also the same for like, he's like, I'll go to a hotel, but once again, I got to figure out like, how do I get a body out that I didn't come in with? So ultimately, his reason to go to the beach in the short story is because he's like going to lay out all her clothes and, go into the ocean with her. And then if she comes back dead, then he can just kind of let the body float away and, pretend
Fake
that
a
she
crime
went
scene.
swimming. Yeah, that she was drowned, that she drowned. Like, that is the reason in the short story where he goes to the ocean. He's like, oh, yeah, I can totally get away with accidentally, with murder, essentially, here.
That's so dark.
Yeah. Not the reason why he goes to the beach in the film.
No, he just goes to the beach because he's thirsty.
Was that really it?
The thirsty is, the whole wink,
thirsty.
wink. He's
thirsty.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I was like, wait, what? What did I miss? So much water everywhere, but now I dropped the drink. He is the worst scientist. Yes, that thirsty. So yes, he goes to the beach with her and kind of walks into the water, and again through the magic of jump cut, like
she just apparates.
Not even like an I Dream of Jeannie jump cut, where at least it's like the same. Like they were managed to like hold and like get her to jump in there. Like it jumps to an entirely different like camera angle. Like it's very awkward.
And then they proceed to frolic.
Mm-hmm.
in the sea while she's naked.
Mm-hmm. Most undoubtedly. I think she even talks about it later. Like, they go back onto the beach and she's in a bathing suit now, and she even like mentions like coming to life unclothed in the water, I think.
I think it's brought up either this time or the time after because it's not the
Yeah.
only time it happens.
No, and it is at this point that she does say that that she didn't, she's not conscious. She doesn't know what's going on. She just, remembers drinking it in the lab, and then poof, she's back up and running again in the ocean. So this is the only point in the film where the private detective becomes important, because he realizes like, they want to continue seeing each other, and their way around being discovered together at the same meeting place is that she's going to go ahead of him to these meeting places, drink more of the potion, shrink herself down, and then let him find her and all of her clothing to then take her to a secret separate location once he's thrown off the private detective to, resuscitate her and have their continue their affair.
Yeah, an extremely convoluted way of just meeting up with somebody.
Mm-hmm. I also don't think we mentioned, and it comes up during this weird, like, tiny petrification courting sequence, that at one point, they just kind of grew tired of bringing all of the petrified animals back to life, and literally hand, like, the elephant and a couple other, like, larger mammals to the male assistant who has returned from vacation. And he's like, what am I supposed to do with these? And they're like, we don't know, get rid of them.
Yeah,
And
I that was such a throwaway thing. I forgot about it.
well, the only reason I even remembered it is because I guess he must have. I don't know how he disposed of them, but one of them must have ended up, like, I guess, on a trash barge, because there's a big headline about how an elephant all of a sudden appears in Normandy, and it's like, oh, I guess that's the elephant that they petrified earlier that's resuscitated and swam ashore in Normandy. Like,
The
that's.
biggest thing that gets me about that is that usually when animals go missing from the zoo,
Hmm.
there's like a thing that happens, like an investigation or something.
Yeah, like
Um,
any robbery.
yeah, like any other theft that cannot be explained. And so the newspaper headline, which tipped me off that this is a foreign film despite the dubbing, is Elephant appears on Normandy Beach. And
Hmm.
it's like, we're in Norm. It's not just an elephant. It's probably the missing elephant. You dingus. That was missing X number of days, weeks, months, indeterminate amount of time ago.
Yeah, because we're through a couple montages at this point, so who knows how long this has been going on.
But imagine
But
just like the rest of the zoo, that like old lab assistant is just kind of like, I'm just going to throw away these crappy figures.
yeah, we've emptied a zoo somewhere, and with no thought to, like, rectifying the situation.
These animals are endangered.
More so now.
Yeah, right? It's just kind of like, I'm sure this rhino will be fine. No, you've put it further along its course of demise. Good move. Bad science.
Yeah, which makes it really hard. Like, honestly, the point at which she again, this is Edith telling the assistant, like, yeah, just get rid of these. We don't need them anymore. Like, makes it hard to, like, feel like at all behind the motives of our, cheating couple here. Like,
The
if you
only the only thing I feel sympathy for is the dog.
yes, who also they
And
go ahead.
I was like, and I think I don't know if it's a landlady or like a dorm mom or something like that. The one who actually cares about where she is and who she's talking to.
Uh, she is. I forget what they are called, but yes, Edith lives in a woman's house, and so yes, she is the one. They talk about how there's a white line on the floor, and that the men aren't supposed to go past that, because
Yeah,
a character that we have not talked about at all so far is the fact that Edith also has a quote unquote, like, boyfriend, question mark,
I think it's a
who
suitor. I think it's a dude who's interested.
okay, who keeps showing up to, like, court her, but then later on, after he's decided that he's not gonna get Edith, and he thinks that, she and Jerome are a thing, and he goes to Monette, and is like, hey, you're an attractive woman, let's do it. Like, in the most weirdly, like, Jerry Lewis, like, hey, lady, like,
Yeah.
just the most off-putting manner of, like, well, we've been alone for more than 5 minutes. Want to have sex?
You're being cheated on? You want to get some revenge?
Mm-hmm. It's super creepy in a film filled with people doing super creepy things very casually.
And I feel like it's not even like it's not something you can excuse with like, oh, it's just a product of its time. I'm pretty sure this was really messed up back then too.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's pause here because I had never heard of this film before.
Yeah,
Like,
same.
there is no world where I understand like this film went beyond its initial 1957, like however it got dubbed into English and released. The fact that I even found it on a DVD, like, shocks the heck out of me. Like,
I have to agree because the version that we watched, the version that you shared, is like almost looks like it was recorded from the reels because it even has
mm-hmm,
like the burn marks in the corner and it has the the grain.
mm-hmm.
Like it looks very much like the kind of original, or at least a recording of the original that like Mystery Science Theater would use.
Yeah, absolutely. So even in its time, like, this film seems to have made no impact at all. Like it's so strange. Um anyway, so they know about the fact that there's this private detective who's following him around, but they want to keep cheating on, his wife. And so she goes to these predetermined places, drinks the solution, and gets shrunk down. And we've got many a comedic happenstance that happens because of this.
Mm.
At one point, a little girl finds her, and only by the grace of God does the little girl happen to, like, I guess, dunk her new quote-unquote dolly into a saltwater puddle and poof her back to life. Again, off screen. Like, pretty much all transformations in this film happen off screen.
Yeah. And then there's the other girl, right? Is like, mommy, mommy, she took my, like, he took my dog. Like, this, the professor walks up to this girl's like, that's mine. And, like, robs her of
Mm-hmm.
something that she found. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Like,
this.
to me, that this is the most infuriating part because it seems like they keep playing this line of like it'll be fun like a game and like they could sit there and like it can be interpreted as like she's kind of into being found naked and like she could be revitalized anywhere, but it always plays off as like this slapstick, silly problem that comes in with Jerome just kind of like brute forcing his way through like the humor and just being a dick about it.
Mm-hmm. And
And they could play like three different angles and they play the bad one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's this weirdly almost abusive, possessive relationship that Jerome has of her. It does not come off as him being protective of her. Like, she is his property. Um, Edith is definitely. I do actually agree with you. There's almost this, like, no, what is it when you like being, like, naked in public?
Exhibitionism.
There is this sort of exhibitionism that Edith seems to have of it. Like, she clearly is having this, like, fun, like, enjoyment out of the idea of, shrinking down into the statue in one place and then not knowing when or where she'll come back. Like, they even talk about the fact that, like, every time she does this, technically Jerome is continuing to get older for however many minutes or hours she's a statue, while she's, basically stuck in that, point. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she will, if they keep doing this, he will certainly age faster than she is going to, and he is already at least 10 years her elder.
And there's like also the distinct possibility that on the way to go see her in the museum where no one would ever go, with a friend, um, to throw off the private investigator, he could die in a car crash. And then no one would ever find her, and she would never get revitalized. And they just like, nah, that'll never happen. I'll be fine.
Yeah. It's this weird middle zone of not caring, but also Edith sounding like that sounds kind of thrilling. Um,
Yeah.
so to
It's a,
make
it's a whole sequence of literally objectifying the woman
Mhm. Yeah,
and
over and over and over again, and
over and over, and she just loves it.
yeah, and Jerome continues to be kind of a jackass about it, and eventually I don't even know why she sends this telegram, but eventually, after her boyfriend, quote unquote, has like come on to Monette, and she's definitely like reached the end of her rope and all of this, um, Edith for some reason sends a telegram to, is it the lab or to Jerome's house? Because I'm saying lab only because I want to give Edith some credit here, but I'm pretty sure it's Jerome's house, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's his house. Yeah.
Yeah. So she sends a telegram to Jerome's house telling him that she's going to shrink herself at like 6 p.m. that night at the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerome is not there to receive it. And in fact, we find out, I think he has got he's at a meeting. Like he has something to do during that time. But
Like his
Monette,
job.
yeah. But Monette gets the telegram and opens it, which I'm pretty sure was illegal. I feel like
I
that
don't
was an
know.
illegal thing to do, is to open somebody else's telegram, kind of like the mail.
I don't know if telegrams are like government services or if French laws apply the same. I mean, it's in the household and they are technically like a thing.
Yeah, it's true. So, but she does actually like she wrestles with herself about whether or not to open it. Actually, like there's a moment where she kind of puts it down and she picks it up and then she kind of holds it to her chest and she takes a breath and then she pulls it out again and then she finally opens it, and it's this message from Edith, sharing that she's going to shrink herself down at the museum, and it's this particular place and this particular time, and that Jerome should come get her.
Yeah, because the best way to cheat is to leave a paper trail.
Yeah, I will say it's not a much smarter move in the story. Although she doesn't send a telegram, she does leave a note for the scientist in the story that his wife then finds. So this is also a scene that is from the film in a form, from the story in a form.
Did we
Um,
mention the fact that whenever the first time he found her in the museum, he just walked into like the like animal like display case and just like knocked over like two impalas and like found her.
was that one? I thought that was when he can't find her after. Oh no, Monette gets her from someplace else, doesn't she?
Yeah, I just remember like, man, those museums have like really lax standards on who can touch the exhibits.
Yeah, it really was kind of making me very anxious to watch him just. It's the one time where he tries to be casual about something, but the moment something doesn't go his way, he like starts freaking out and like pushing everything over. Where he walks very like there's just like not even a velvet rope that goes all the way across the exhibit. Like there's a velvet rope that goes 2/3, then there's a third of space, and then there's 2/3 of more velvet rope, and he just walks in to all the taxidermy in this African exhibit, and yeah, as you said, like he ends up knocking over the taxidermied animals trying to find her.
And like leaning on the taxidermied rhino, just kind of like, yeah, I guess hmm.
Hmm, guess
No,
I made a
that's right. That
mess.
is the scene where he doesn't find her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he's like, oh, I guess she's not here. Um, and of course, the reason is that Monette got there first and has acquired Edith, but doesn't tell anybody. She keeps it a secret. And at that point, I think we're introduced to the police chief.
Oh my god. The police inspector.
Yes, the police inspector,
Oh,
who is doing his best, like Clouseau almost, but like it's another scene that is meant to be funny, only because of the juxtaposition, and I think I used the word right that time, of what we're expecting him to do, because I think for a little while Jerome just starts calling around the different places, just asking them if somebody has turned into the lost and found a tiny statue.
oh yeah, that montage. of like, we can all relate to, he goes to the museum lost and found. We don't give out items for like 3 days. You need to talk to this department. So he goes to like the some other department, and they're like, well, we don't have anything. You gotta go talk to this place. It's like, well, this is collections.
Yeah.
A lot of effort went into getting each of those places for like 2 seconds of him standing at a counter with a different person telling him no.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're cutting out, dear listener, we are cutting out a lot of non sequitur here. Like, I'm only going to briefly mention the fact there's an entire sequence where he thinks he's spotted the private detective, leads him on a merry chase, and then it turns out to be somebody who's just also on vacation. Like, there's so many of these little, like, scenes that basically are there purely for the amusement of the audience, not necessarily to further the story or the plot in any fashion.
Yeah. I thought it was the runtime because this movie is like only like an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's something like that. It is not a long, not sure exactly what the length is, but it is not long.
It is an extraordinarily short movie, and it still fails to fill the time with anything meaningful.
It is 82 minutes long.
Yeah.
And yeah, I want to say now, before we get to the end of the movie, though, it moves quickly. Like, I don't feel like I felt bored at any point except for the private detective, like, scoop-to-do runaround scene. Like, that was the first time where I was like, how many more minutes are in this film? Like, for the most part, I find it, amusing is the best word that I can say.
I find it jarring.
Yeah.
I had a hard time keeping track of what was happening where and when, and it's probably because all the places looked the same and all the people looked the same.
That's a fair point. So after in probably one of the few moments of actual humanity here, but again, I think it's more of a toddler upset that he hasn't gotten his toy than a person worried about the actual existence of another individual.
Right. He's not worried for her safety. He's worried that he can't get what he wants.
Yeah, Jerome finally goes to the police, and they properly figure out that he's not going to them for an object, but because he's missing a person. And the police inspector very quickly turns from, "Oh, yes, tell us about your story of woe. Yes, we are here for you. We are here for you. We always get our man. We always get our man. So tell us where you've put her, like 17 body parts that you've cut up and left in the alleyways across Paris."
That guy would suck at Clue so hard.
Like, his turn from, like, good cop, good cop, good cop, good cop, and now I am bad cop. Like
it starts off so good, though, because he's just kind of like, you and me, Professor, we're in the same business. We're here to find answers. We're here to seek truth. He's like, yeah, I guess so. And he goes, so, you don't have an alibi, do you? No. And you were the last person she was seen with? I guess so. So, how'd you kill her?
Yeah. Like, I really do love the turn there. Like, this is one of those moments I'm like, there are parts of this film where I'm like, I am kind of enjoying watching this. This is weirdly enjoyable.
Oh, and before he makes that accusation, he's like, hey, this guy looks really nervous. The assistant, can you go get him some brandy?
Yeah.
He never even gets the brandy before he goes straight on, like, confess.
Well, I think even Jerome, like, turns it down. He's like, "No, I don't need brandy. Like, no,
please
I'm good.
don't.
I'm good. Fine. Yeah, please don't." So yeah, basically, the police inspector basically talks Jerome into getting himself arrested.
Yeah, I mean, Jerome couldn't talk himself out of it.
No, and so he's like, "I need to make a phone call. Like, I gotta put. Can I like call the dean or something?" And somehow Manette intercepts the call. I don't remember how she does, but she gets the call.
I think the dean's at his place because he's like, I'm not gonna be there. I'm in jail, and I think the dean either is with her or the dean contacts her.
Okay.
Because then she shows up.
Yeah, so Manette shows up and talks him out of getting arrested. Like, figures, like, like, puts him somewhere where he couldn't have been, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I saw such and such here," and, like, gives him an alibi out.
Oh, because she pulls up the private investigator reports.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, they
She
go
pulled out like,
through
I've been
everything.
having someone spy on him, and on this day at this time he was at this place alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
so that
then, yeah,
that gets him out of that gives him the alibi. And then Monette just goes straight up sociopathic, like extortionist.
yeah, because the game's up. She knows, and she has the evidence in her purse.
Mm-hmm. And she tells Jerome, basically, we're going to go on a steamship cruise together. We're going to get married. And if you say no to me, I am going to throw her over the side of the ship.
Yep, and she'll be gone forever and probably die.
Mm-hmm. Because again, let's remember, all that Manette knows at this point is that that Edith has somehow shrank herself down. I think Manette is smart enough to be like, oh, you showed me these little things earlier, these animals. Oh, okay, Edith has done that to herself. Like I give Manette a lot of credit here for like
Yeah.
putting together some disparate pieces of this puzzle.
Yeah.
But she does not know. I don't think they've ever shared with her that they've figured out how to bring them back.
No, she doesn't know because it wouldn't have been a threat of. Well, actually, it would have been more of a threat of I'll leave her abandoned and drowning in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. But no, I'm pretty sure her thinking is, I'm just going to throw her overboard. She'll be lost to sea forever, which again is tantamount to murder.
It is literally murder. Like that's what murder is.
Yeah. Regardless of any knowledge that Monette has one way or another, like we have now seen this woman turn to threats of murder to get what she wants. And as soon as she says that, though, as soon as she's like, oh yeah, and if you don't show up, I'm gonna throw her into the ocean, Jerome, in the least subtle way, is like, oh, the ocean, eh? Are you sure that's what you'll do if I don't show up?
You better not.
Mm-hmm, please don't. I'd be so heartbroken. And so we nicely crossfade to them at the steamer ship.
Yeah, like at the pier.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Manette has got like servants bringing her like 16 steamer trunks full of clothing onto the ship.
Because she's an heiress.
Mm-hmm. And they make a joke about Jerome only having like 2 steamer trunks worth of clothing or something like something weirdly cutting.
It was 2, and because they're like, oh, and it's not here.
Mm-hmm. Because Mr. Smug, again, who does not seem to understand how reverse psychology works, shows up and is like, I've rethought this. I'm not gonna go. And because Manette is now surrounded by her mother and a couple other people, can't just whip out this naked statue and dangle it in front of him and be like, are you sure? Like, she just keeps like patting her purse, being like, you think that's your decision here, buddy? That's what you want to do?
Because I'll do it.
Mm-hmm. And again, Jerome is like, oh, okay, yeah, no, don't, just go ahead. Yep, mm-hmm, yep, sure,
He doubles down. He's like, you wouldn't.
Yeah. He's like egging her on now, almost.
You wouldn't dare throw it.
So they get onto the steamer, and Jerome just books it to this other dock. And like any 1980s like action movie, like jumps into the thing and is like, follow that boat. Like,
yeah, he paid the guy, like he arranged it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like, follow the boat.
And the guy keeps asking him, like,
far enough.
Yeah, just until I say otherwise. He's like,
we're going into the ocean. Mm-hmm. I didn't say stop.
Like, I'm pretty sure that boat's going to America. Keep going. Just, yeah. I'm not paying you to talk, man. Keep going.
I'll pay you double if you just keep going.
Mm-hmm. So they get out fairly far. Manette has finally taken Edith out of her purse. And there is, again, I think she's really seriously considering the fact that, I'm about to throw a human being over the side of a boat.
To be lost in the bottom of the sea forever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's pause for a second here, though, because I would like to ask another question. What really is Manette's endgame? Because, all right, let's say Jerome got on the boat and went with her. Like, okay, how long is she going to keep Edith like in her purse? Like,
As long as she needs to. It's not about short-term planning. It's not about long-term planning. It's about getting what you want.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty much the only thing any of the characters in this film think about is what they in this particular moment want.
Yeah, like stealing elephants and rhinos from the zoo.
Yeah, and then when there's no further use for them because they can't figure out how they would bring them back to life in a large enough, body of water, they just task them off to somebody else to dispose of.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So Manette is standing there at the side of the ship, kind of looking at Edith, and kind of like tapping her on her hand, like, what am I gonna do with you? Am I really gonna do this? Okay. And this, like, I think I mentioned earlier that like Jerome talks about how Monette is really just interested in being like in the process of being in a relationship. Like she likes going through the steps of like being engaged and like all of the social things that involves.
She likes courtship.
Yes, thank you. And she is approached by a man on the ship that is kind of chatting her up and is clearly trying to talk to her, who also appears to be like 10 years older than Jerome was.
Oh yeah, this older professor looking dude just like comes up.
I think he's like, I know your father, and she's like, oh, do you? And he notices Edith and is like, oh, that's a nice statuette you have there. Let me look. May I take a look? And she's like,
may I touch?
No. Yeah, touch, may I? And she kind of freaks out a little bit. She's like, no, don't. And they like struggle for a second, and she accidentally tosses Edith over the side. And we have another awkward jump cut of all of a sudden Edith swimming next to a boat who, if I understand how boats and water work, should pretty swiftly be being sucked up into its current and into the rudder. Like, I've seen Lost Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Like, I think I understand how this works.
Yeah, it's like they're like waiting for her, and then she gets thrown off the side of the boat, and then she just like is in open water. Because think about it. Lady drops a figure she didn't mean to drop. You're watching it all the way down. And then it hits the water and it turns into a naked woman. And then your fiancé is there with his own boat.
Mm-hmm.
Instantly. Like, this is not out of eyesight, but they treat it like, oh, good thing she missed that. Whew.
Mm-hmm. And that's basically how the film ends. Like, they're on the boat together, headed back. And the driver's like, oh yeah, he jumps in to save her, right?
Yeah, he jumps out, like, he's in his suit, and he, like, takes off the jacket and takes off his shoes, and he jumps into the ocean to grab this naked woman.
And again, you had enough foresight, Jerome, to, like, rent the boat ahead of time, but you didn't, like, think, oh, yeah, maybe I'm gonna have to jump into the water to help her out.
Or even, like, a life ring or anything.
Mm-hmm. But he gets her into the boat, again, seemingly on totally open water. There's no, like, waves or wake from this giant ocean liner, like, disrupting anything.
Right.
And I think there's some, like, tee-hee-hee, maybe I shouldn't do that again. No, I'm never letting you do that again. Like, some sort of, like, we're never going to ever experiment again with this miracle drug again, because look how close it brought us to ruin. Even though this exact situation is pretty much what Edith has enjoyed thinking about possibly happening.
On top of the fact that, like, that trip that in the steamliner isn't going to last forever. He still has to break off the engagement, and he tried once, and his fiancée said no. Which, I'm going to say this right now for everyone who's potentially in a relationship. If you're in a relationship with someone and either party says, I don't want to be in a relationship, you no longer have a relationship. You don't get to say, yeah, we do. Don't work that way.
Yeah, so this isn't a situation where each one of you has to turn the key at the same time to, like, cancel the detonation. Like, no, one key's enough. Like, once that key is turned on one side of the situation, it's done.
A divorce takes two people signing a piece of paper. But to not be in a relationship takes literally one of you saying, I'm no longer putting time or effort into this. I don't want it. and that makes the other person who pushes for it bad.
Mm-hmm. And I do think we're supposed to surmise from, because this film is putting in the effort, like it is trying in certain ways, and
Yeah.
I do feel like we are supposed to surmise from Monette's manly attentions on the ship that's like, oh, she's gonna be fine, she's gonna find somebody, to basically start this process all over again with. Um, so
An
I think,
archaeology professor who cares
yeah,
about statues.
exactly, and that that's supposed to be, I think, uh, tying up that aspect of the plot. But we've basically have, though, for our impact here, like pretty much nothing. Like nobody has of our main characters here has really learned anything. If anything, they've made themselves even more awful by being like, oh, okay, well, we've had our extramarital, quote unquote, because it's engagement, fun here, but now that the fiance's out of the way, we can just forget about this substance and never deal with it again.
Yeah, there is like negative impact because anything that happens when she's shrunk is negated. Nothing happens, so they don't accidentally chip a piece. They don't like her drinking a lot of the solution or being in an improper salinity to be revived doesn't make any difference. Like there's no mental aspect changes. It's all just pretty much just a mechanism to get her from point A to point B so they can bone.
Yep, and that's the long and short of it. I will say that the endings between the short story, the diminishing draft, which again I've totally forgotten whether or not I even said what the short story's title was. At the end of the diminishing draft, the unnamed wife in the short story, finds Jean, as she's called in the story, and is in the apartment waiting for her husband to get home, and is like, oh yeah, look what I found, and is like, you're never going to see her again, and chucks her out the window. And the last thing in the story is this guy hearing her shatter as she hits the ground. Like, that's how the short story ends.
And that's much more horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's trying to be a horror story.
There's actual like conflict and repercussions. Something has a consequence, as opposed to they continue to dance around this incredibly volatile situation and nothing happens. The conflict is an idea. It's a suggestion of a problem that never actually culminates. It's the dumbest thing, and I hate it.
See, I've watched a lot of like zany madcap, like black and white 40s and 50s caper films in some fashions. Like it's a genre that I have a little bit of a nostalgia for, just from like AMC, or even like since we've moved out here to where we get MeTV, like Svengoolie does some of these like science fiction-y sort of zany older films like this. Like and okay, I'm gonna say this up front, that this is a totally inappropriate comparison of movies here, but the weird sexual tension of the relationship between Jerome and Edith like kind of gave me Thin Man vibes. That's the girl in his pocket and the Thin Man should never ever be compared to at all. Like that is the son versus the son of the Thin Man versus the I don't know, burning dog hair of girl in his pocket in comparison. But I don't know, there's just something about the weird playfulness, like zigzaggy nature of a film, totally casually exploring this sociopathic relationship of these characters and the science that they have at their hands, because this is a doomsday, this is a weapon of mass destruction that they have. Like, you put this stuff, like we've determined that like just a little bit of it, no matter what your size, can turn somebody into a tiny statue that can be crushed. Like, turn this into like a misting thing, or just put it in a squirt gun, and you have honestly a horrible weapon.
Yeah.
that these guys are just futzing about with.
They're they don't recognize what they're playing with, and they use it for trivial bullshit.
And I swear, in a more modern, uh more like, let's say if Bloomhouse was going to remake A Girl in His Pocket, I guarantee you that at some point Jerome would have been like, I know how to resolve my, annoying fiance. We're just shrink her down and put her on our shelf. Like, because
Right.
they do that to the dog at one point. Like, the dog is barking and making annoyances, and the scientist literally just grabs the dog, makes it drink some of this stuff, shrinks it down, puts it on the table, and the assistant who was like walking it is like, "What did you do with the dog? Like, where'd it go?" Like, they're just casually abusing this stuff in the weirdest ways.
It's so unimaginative. And there's so much possibility in this. Like, as I was watching this, I was like, I can think of like 5 different ways to make this, like, horror. I can think of like 3 different ways to make it like erotic. I can think of several different ways to make it suspenseful. And all these, like, just this mechanism of there is a drink that turns people into small inanimate objects. Like, that hits some notes for lots of different aspects of body modification. And all they do is it's a taxi service. So you can cheat, or to shut dogs up, or steal from the zoo. And
And
then
I
what do you
think,
do with the stuff you stole from the zoo? Keep it for display reasons until you're done.
yeah,
You're not
and then throw
testing
it
different
away.
cell structures, and you're not testing. They did no real science, and they didn't even allude to doing real science with any of the subjects that they gathered. It
Like,
was just, yeah.
it is the thing. Like, there's never even just like the babble of like, oh, look at how, like, during the shrinking process they've calcified. Like, there's no attempt to even explore the circumstances of the shrunken animals or Edith. There's no greater. I mean, it honestly, the whole thing about him going to be a scientist for the soda pop company is basically the best, like, analogy to this film. Like, it is it is pretending to be something, because in that age you'd think that soda pop was like a health thing in some
Mm-hmm.
ways, but it is just bubbly and short, and coming up short to what it really is, and not even acknowledging what it's truly doing. And I think I 100% say that my actual kind of amusement of this, like, I would welcomely rewatch this film myself, if only because I'm amused by the form it is, the 1950s zany, like, goofball comedy that it is. I mean, that's basically what it is. At the fact that it's an international version of that, it's a French film that's been dubbed into English, but and so that, outside of the substance and the transformation aspect, I find amusing, and like, I want to rewatch just to kind of study it and compare it to the films that I've seen done elsewhere. As far as like a science fiction film that's about the cause, process, and impact of a petrification shrinking process, it is a total failure.
Yeah, I think the only way I'd ever watch this again is if it was for like a literary analysis. And just like you show it to a bunch of film students, you're like, okay, let's talk about what could have been.
Mm-hmm.
What did they do right? What did they do wrong? What didn't they do at all?
I think, as far as when I try and think about whether or not I feel like it has a place in somebody's personal collection or in the Transformium, it definitely doesn't really have any place in anyone's personal collection. If particularly if you're like thinking, oh, it's about petrification and shrinking. Yeah, that sounds like a movie I want to be interested in. No, it's not.
Yeah, they
Like,
don't do anything with it.
no, you will not find anything interesting in it. The only thing I do find, like, that I'd love to see explored more is that, like, aspect of Edith who's like clearly excited about being like found as a naked, like, little statue, and not knowing what's happening to her, or when or where she'll be brought back. Like, she seems very excited about the possibility almost of being left in this state for like 50 years until, she ends up like being dropped by accident into a puddle and finding herself basically in the future. Like, that is,
Demolition Man style.
yeah, exactly. Like, that is something that I'm like, oh man, if only we'd had a chance to have Edith be an actual person who could explore that.
Right?
That would have been great. But as far as the film is, like, it was super hard for me to get a hold of this DVD. It was extremely hard to find. It is not worth the effort in tracking it down. Do not bother with it for a personal transformation collection. And I would even say that, given the fact that again, as you said, the actual like aspect of transformation in it is not explored for what it is, outside of just, this is the MacGuffin that lets us continue to have our affair. It almost has no place in the Transformium.
Yeah. This is one of those times where when we look at the movies and we try to guess what the intention of the writer and the director was, and I think this is one of the few ones we watched where like there's literally no allusion to like the sexy potential, right? Because like with some of the things that we've watched, it's like this is absolutely to explore the erotic potential of this transformation, and this movie is not that at all.
Outside of him like lewdly staring at her naked body, yeah, there's no.
But he would do
There's
that if she wasn't a statue.
true.
I don't think her
Although,
being a statue is why he's doing that. I think it's the symbolism of this is my fling, and I will keep her close to make us forget that she's actually a plaster statue.
okay, yeah,
As opposed to, like, man, I can't imagine all the things I'm going to do with this thing later. Because when you browse the internet, you find things that people do with statues that you wouldn't expect people to do with statues. And this movie doesn't even allude to that.
no, there's not even a point where it's like, Jerome ends up shrunken down as like this very rigid and straight little statue, which any either Edith or his fiance could do something with. Hint, hint, and wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like,
Yeah.
that's not
Role
it.
reversal, anything. Like there's no like even like played dominance. It's it's not even there's no power play. It's literally just, well, she's a statue now. Let's get her to not be a statue. Eventually.
Yeah, when it's convenient for me, or I feel like I've become endangered by not having you around as a flesh and blood individual. And,
Right.
yeah, I do recommend, if somebody wants to read the diminishing draft. It's not very long. It's pretty short. It's been republished a couple times. Again, it was originally published in 1918, but it was republished again later on in 1939 in Famous Fantastic Mysteries, December 1939. So if you Google Famous Fantastic Mysteries, December 1939, and go down the results a little bit, you will find the archive.org hosted PDF scan of that issue. And I do believe that this is one of those situations where the magazine, when the copyright laws changed, was not renewed for copyright. So I do believe this is in the public domain.
Cool.
Look it up, because not only is it an interesting read because there's a little bit more exploration of Jean's like excitement over what's happened to her. There's more discussion of like the poses she's in when she's shrunken down and frozen. Like, they talk more about like how she's shaped and how her body looks in this form. And there's also a lovely illustration of her in that issue that I would highly recommend. So it's The Diminishing Draft by, and it's German, so I'm saying a V, but it's spelled W. Valdemar Kemperfurt. Just search the Diminishing Draft. It'll be far easier to spell. But yeah, so I recommend that. But Girl in His Pocket, not so much.
Yeah. I looked it up. They don't even have like a Mystery Science 3000 of it. Like they don't there's no like parody commentary of this film. It has literally made no cultural impact.
No, and even the Wikipedia page, because I was trying to see like what else has of some of these actors gone on to, and there's a couple items of note. But even the Wikipedia page is literally just a French fantasy film from 1957, directed by, written by, blah blah blah. The scenario is based on a novel, Diminishing Draft, of Valdar Conflict. Like, there's the extent of the Wikipedia entry. Like,
Wow.
there is outside of Keith's somewhat inaccurate description on IMDb, there is no further information that I can find on the internet about this film, and it boggles my mind.
Well, now we are it. We are the pioneers following the small trail that Keith left us.
Yes, exactly. Just one item of note about the cast. Jean Morais, or Marias, I believe, is who plays Jerome, and he did a lot of French films, obviously, but one which I thought had been done by Mystery Science Theater 3000 at first, but now I'm thinking it's a different French comic. He played, for anybody who has some knowledge of obscure French comics from the 1960s, he played Fantomas in the movie adaptation. There's a trilogy, actually, of French films that adapted the Fantomas character. And he was Fantomas, for anybody who at all cares or knows who that is. Also, the woman who played Edith, Genevieve Page, was in El Cid, which is probably the film that I saw in her repertoire that I thought. The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, some people may also know, because that was a Billy Wilder film. But for the most part, these seem to be actors and actresses who didn't do a whole lot that was big in America. Again, a couple exceptions. Genevieve Page, I think, had the most American exposure, but for the most part, I can't find much to indicate that that Girl in His Pocket had any reason to be part of our popular zeitgeist. Like, it just kind of came and went.
I just looked up Fantomas, which is spelled with an F, by the way.
Yes.
This is the spookiest thing I've seen, and then there's like a shot of him, and like, yeah, that's Jerome.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Serial killer. Occupation serial killer. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Spooky.
I know it's a different French spy film that was like the very last episode of the classic Mystery Science Theater episodes, but it wasn't Fantomas. It was somebody else, and I'm blanking on who it is. Feel free to email us at modmetapodcast@gmail.com and threaten to take away my Mystery Science Theater 3000 fan card, because I'm mad at myself for forgetting what the random French spy film was that was the last episode of the classic series.
Oh,
But
I can't believe you've done this.
what?
Oh, no,
Gotten us in trouble?
I mean, I can't defend us in any way.
So, but yeah, so Girl in His Pocket. We are now, I guess, on the internet, the leading experts on this very random French film.
Oh, I love being a leading expert of something obscure and silly.
So, well, as is usually the case, I was the one who chose the film, which I hadn't watched before and did not know what I was getting us into. So that means that, well, before we get to the tease for the next episode, we here on Modern Metamorphoses would like to try and remember, i.e. me, to actually sort of, do our usual pitch. So, yeah. We have an email, modmetapodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions for us about this or any of our other movies, or if you'd like to recommend a movie, or if we've said something that you deeply disagree with and would like to voice your opinion to us, feel free at modmetapodcast@gmail.com. We also, we are currently unsponsored, and because I have sort of stubbornly decided that we are only going to entertain advertisements in the transformation field. Sorry, Fort. I know I kind of came down on that idea.
Oh, that's all right.
But if you've got a transformation project of any type, send us an email. We've got some rates. We can do a read ad for you if you want to support the podcast. We would be happy to take your money. So
Yeah, I'd love to put these good chords to use.
And a fine set of chords they are.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So if you're interested in the transformation comics and prose that I do, you can find my Patreon at patreon.com/dsredux, DSREDUX. Or if you go to Amazon.com and search for my name, Dan Standing, you'll find a number of ebooks. If you've got Kindle Unlimited, you can read those for, well, not free because you pay for Kindle Unlimited, but for the same money you're already paying for other things.
Included in the cost.
Yes, you can read Transformation Tales as written by me on that as well. What have you got on your plate, Mr. Fort?
By the time this comes out, who knows?
I know. We've got like 8 episodes still to post.
Yeah.
So
by next year, I should still be working along. Hopefully I'll have found a script writer by then to help me make a show that's going to be the Bill Nye of social sciences. If anyone's interested in helping me out with that, I would love it. So go ahead and send those entries over to the ModMeta podcast email, and I would love to read them.
I would say we should come up with some sort of like special subject line or like hashtag or something to search for them by in the inbox, but I have a feeling we won't have any trouble finding them.
Yeah, I feel like because we give all the mail a distinct amount of attention it deserves. And so marketing stuff, not a lot, but if it's actually written by a human being, we are all about it.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that is all the items. So Mr. Fort, as I was alluding to earlier, it is your turn to pick something, hopefully with more thought to why we were watching it than I've put into my recent selections.
I generally don't have a lot of forethought when it comes to these kinds of things. It's more of just kind of like a hankering, a craving of sorts. And so on my trend of things that are kind of lighthearted and colorful, kind of as a true juxtaposition from the disorganized and black and white that we've been also seeing, we're going to look at Fern Gully.
Ooh. I like Fern Gully. I don't know if I'm showing my age here or not, but I saw Fern Gully in the theater.
Oh.
I had a butt in the seat for Fern Gully when it first came out. And,
when did that come out?
Before Aladdin, I want to say.
Fern Gully was 1992, so I might have been in theaters, but I was 3.
Okay. 1992. Hold on.
Yep.
I was 10. I would have been 10 when it came out. So I think I was definitely remember watching that in the theater, and I don't know if I've really watched it all the way through again since then.
Oh, I know I remember it very well, so I'm looking forward to seeing it again with my adult eyes.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there are definitely 2 songs from it that I have definitely looked up on YouTube to rewatch over and over and over again. Because that's Robin Williams and Tim Curry, and so anything they do needs to be revisited. But I look forward to tracking that down and watching it in full. All right, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So, if anybody out there has... Howdy.
Hi. Apparently, my Skype was just like, no.
Well, I'm just going to pick up right where my was. So, if anybody out there has fond memories of Fern Gully or wants to know what we think of it, tune in next time to Modern Metamorphoses. And for everybody who's gotten this far, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by, sticking around. We love to have you.
Mm-hmm. Have a good night.
Take care.